Welcome to Sleepy Case Files, a place where quiet storytelling meets mysterious cases. Tonight, we slowly explore a story from the world of true crime.
When historians look back at the early days of American cinema, they often view the 1922 murder of William Desmond Taylor as a fascinating, unsolved puzzle. People usually treat the case like a classic detective novel. They constantly ask who pulled the trigger of the .38 caliber revolver. However, approaching this tragedy as a simple mystery misses the massive historical significance of the event. To truly grasp what happened on February 2nd, 1922, we must view the crime scene from an entirely unconventional angle. We should not look at it as a failure of police investigation. Instead, we must understand it as the first highly successful corporate cover-up in modern entertainment history. The true killer of the story was not merely the person holding the weapon. The more powerful culprit was the Hollywood studio system itself, a massive financial machine that deliberately assassinated the truth to protect its own fragile public image. In the early 1920s, the motion picture business was undergoing a radical transformation. It was rapidly shifting from a chaotic collection of independent artists into a tightly controlled, highly profitable industry. The powerful executives who ran the major studios realized they were manufacturing something far more valuable than just silent movies. They were selling dreams, glamour, and perfection to a massive audience of ordinary citizens. When Taylor, a highly respected and famous director, was discovered dead in his elegant apartment at 404B South Alvarado Street in Los Angeles, California, the studio bosses faced an existential threat. A huge, uncontrolled scandal could utterly destroy their profitable empire. Therefore, the top executives made a swift, ruthless decision to control the narrative. They treated Taylor's tragic death not as a human loss, but as a deeply flawed movie script that desperately needed urgent, unauthorized rewrites. To comprehend why the Hollywood machine reacted with such intense panic, we must closely examine the complicated victim. William Desmond Taylor was a man constructed entirely out of secrets. His actual birth name was William Cunningham Dean Tanner. Years before he became an elite Hollywood director, he lived a remarkably ordinary life in New York City. He managed a successful antique furniture business, supported a wife, and raised a young daughter. Then, on one completely normal afternoon in 1908, he simply vanished without a single trace. He entirely abandoned his family, his business, and his past identity. He eventually traveled to California and brilliantly recreated himself as a sophisticated, highly educated English gentleman. Taylor was a complex individual built on lies and hidden shadows. This dual life made him a prime target for blackmail or murder, but it also transformed him into a massive liability for his employer, Paramount Pictures. If the police investigators dug too deeply into his private affairs, nobody knew what dark secrets they might uncover. Taylor directed exactly 59 films during his impressive career. He worked intimately with the biggest, most profitable stars of the silent era. He knew their personal flaws, their illegal habits, and their deepest fears. The studio executives fully understood that opening Taylor's personal files meant violently opening the dark, hidden closets of Hollywood's most beloved faces. The incredibly unusual nature of this famous case becomes glaringly obvious when we analyze the chaotic morning his body was found. At exactly 7:30 a.m. on February 2nd, 1922, Taylor's personal houseman, Henry Peavy, arrived at the Alvarado court apartment to serve breakfast. Peavy walked into the living room and found the famous director lying motionless on the floor. Peavy immediately ran outside, screaming loudly for help. Within minutes, the quiet neighborhood filled with a crowd of panicked people. But here is the most astonishing, unconventional detail of the entire story. The local police officers were not the first authorities to take command of the bloody crime scene. Instead of the police, high-ranking studio executives arrived and took total control. Charles Ayton, a powerful general manager for Paramount Pictures, reportedly rushed into the house, accompanied by a dedicated group of loyal studio employees. Long before the official detectives secured the fragile area, these corporate men were busily altering the environment. Multiple witnesses reported seeing these executives urgently burning personal papers. In the living room fireplace, they were rapidly removing unknown documents from Taylor's private desk. Furthermore, they were hauling away large cases of expensive alcohol, which was strictly illegal in 1922 due to federal prohibition laws. Why would a wealthy studio boss risk a serious jail sentence to destroy evidence at a fresh murder scene? The standard conventional belief is that they were trying to protect one or two specific movie stars from embarrassment. But the deeper, more accurate truth is that they were fiercely protecting the entire abstract concept of Hollywood. They were hurriedly building a massive, invisible wall between the ugly, messy reality of their unstable actors and the shiny, flawless image they constantly sold to the American public. The crime scene was immediately and purposely corrupted. Crucial evidence was not lost by simple accident. It was systematically destroyed by professional fixers. This bold action clearly proves that the studio executives believed managing the upcoming public relations disaster was infinitely more important than capturing a violent murderer. Because the physical evidence was totally ruined by the studios, the hungry media immediately focused their attention on the bizarre people surrounding the victim. The sensational newspapers quickly turned the various suspects into dramatic characters in a cheap, tragic play. Each suspect conveniently represented a distinctly different moral danger to the carefully crafted Hollywood image. Suspect number one was the legendary Mabel Normand. She was a brilliant, universally loved comic actress and an extremely close companion of Taylor. She was also officially the last known person to see him alive. Normand departed his house at exactly 7:45 p.m. on the dark night before he tragically died. Behind her funny, joyful screen persona, Normand struggled daily with a severe, crippling drug addiction. The studio bosses panicked intensely because Taylor had been actively trying to help her achieve sobriety. He had even courageously reported her dangerous drug dealers to the federal authorities. If Normand's desperate drug habits became front-page news, her incredibly lucrative career would instantly vanish. The efficient studio machine worked aggressively to paint her simply as a sad, grieving friend, successfully hiding the much darker truth of her tragic addiction from the aggressive reporters. Sadly, the terrible rumors still damaged her reputation, perfectly showing how incredibly fragile a major star's public standing truly was during the 1920s. Suspect number 2 was the young, beautiful Mary Miles Minter. She was an extremely popular actress, heavily promoted by the studios as a pure, innocent, angelic girl. However, behind closed doors, Minter was desperately, almost violently in love with Taylor, despite the fact that he was fully 30 years older than her. When the confused police finally searched the messy bedroom, they discovered highly passionate love letters written by Minter, carefully hidden inside Taylor's tall riding boots. Even worse, they found a pink silk nightgown bearing her personal initials. The shocking discovery of these intimate items destroyed her carefully manufactured innocent image forever. Minter's overbearing mother, Charlotte Shelby, quickly became suspect number 3. Shelby was an incredibly controlling, aggressive, and wealthy stage mother who managed every single aspect of her daughter's life. Shelby owned a .38 caliber pistol, which was the specific type of weapon used to shoot Taylor in the back. Furthermore, Shelby possessed powerful, highly paid lawyers and maintained close personal friendships with key figures inside the district attorney's office. Countless historians heavily suspect that Shelby paid massive illegal bribes to keep herself and her famous daughter entirely out of a prison cell. The intense hatred between the mother and daughter provided a perfect dramatic motive for murder, yet the police strangely never pushed hard enough to arrest her. Then there was suspect number 4, a shadowy figure named Edward Sands. He was Taylor's previous valet and a known criminal. Sands had successfully stolen substantial amounts of money, expensive jewelry and personal checkbooks from Taylor several months earlier. After the theft, Sands completely disappeared from California. Sands served as an extremely convenient villain for everyone involved. He was a low-class criminal with multiple fake identities and a proven history of dishonest behavior. Blaming the absent Sands was logically the absolute easiest option for the terrified studio executives and the lazy police department. A runaway thief is a much cleaner, less damaging murderer than a globally famous actress or a highly wealthy, politically connected mother. However, the plain, undeniable fact that absolutely no one was ever formally charged with the crime loudly demonstrates the incredible, overwhelming power of the studio cover-up. The powerful district attorney, Thomas Lee Woolwine, remained unusually quiet and strangely passive throughout the entire ordeal. The official police investigation moved at an incredibly slow, frustrating pace. Key witnesses suddenly departed the state or mysteriously changed their original stories. Important police files completely vanished from locked cabinets. It genuinely seemed as if an invisible, highly powerful director had forcefully yelled, "Cut," on the entire legal process. Another strange detail of the investigation involved the poor houseman, Henry Peavy. The police treated him with shocking disrespect and bizarre cruelty. Because Peavy was a black man working in a highly segregated society, the authorities immediately targeted him as an easy scapegoat. In one of the most ridiculous, deeply unprofessional moments in American police history, the detectives actually dragged Peavy into a dark graveyard late at night. They arranged for a person to wear a white sheet and pretend to be the ghost of William Desmond Taylor, hoping the terrifying sight would force Peavy to confess to the murder. Peavy, clearly recognizing the fake ghost, simply laughed at the foolish officers. This incredibly absurd event perfectly highlights how broken and deeply unprofessional the official investigation was from the very first day. It proves that the authorities were far more interested in creating a fast, convenient solution than discovering the complicated actual truth. This frustrating series of events brings us directly back to the unconventional, broader viewpoint of the entire tragedy. The Taylor murder remains permanently famous, primarily because it is completely unsolved. Yet, the distinct lack of a final legal solution was not simply a tragic failure of the local police. It was, in reality, a massive, brilliant success of early corporate public relations. By the early months of 1922, the conservative American public was already growing increasingly angry at Hollywood's notoriously wild, immoral behavior. Just a few short months earlier, the horrific Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle scandal had deeply shocked and disgusted the entire nation. Religious groups and conservative politicians were aggressively threatening to heavily censor all movies. The wealthy studio owners fully knew that exactly one more ugly, uncontrolled scandal could entirely destroy their highly profitable business model. Taylor's bloody murder forced the terrified industry leaders to rapidly invent a strict system of corporate self-regulation. In a desperate, calculated move, the major film studios joined together and hired Will Hayes, a highly respected former United States Postmaster General, to completely clean up Hollywood's dirty image. The powerful Hayes office was essentially born directly from the smoking ashes of the Taylor case. The studio executives intelligently realized they could never truly control their wealthy stars' chaotic private lives, but they absolutely could control the powerful media narrative. They immediately began writing strict morality clauses into every single actor's contract. If a star behaved badly or brought public shame to the company, the studio now possessed the legal power to fire them instantly and ruin their career. The tragic murder of William Desmond Taylor effectively served as a brutal, highly effective masterclass in modern crisis management. The giant studios quickly learned how to successfully hide damaging evidence, effectively manipulate local police departments, and smoothly feed the hungry media a highly polished, heavily edited story. They willingly sacrificed the honest truth of Taylor's brutal death to skillfully build a massive protective shield around their vulnerable industry. When modern people read about this fascinating case today, they are essentially still reading the carefully edited script that Paramount Pictures aggressively started writing on the chaotic morning of February 2nd, 1922. Ultimately, we can confidently state that William Desmond Taylor tragically died two distinct times. He died the first time from a cold, hard bullet fired directly into his back. He died a second, much more permanent time when his trusted friends and powerful employers deliberately erased his true life to save their expanding movie empire. We will probably never officially know the actual name of the person who pulled the heavy trigger of the .38 caliber gun on that dark, quiet night. But we absolutely do know exactly who benefited the most from the resulting permanent silence. The giant movie studios masterfully used his bleeding corpse to invent the modern practice of corporate crisis management. Looking at the historic case from this specific unconventional angle changes absolutely everything about how we understand the story. It is no longer just a sad, mysterious tale about a dead man bleeding on a fancy rug. It is instead a massive historical milestone. It represents the exact moment the wild, chaotic version of early Hollywood finally grew up and became a ruthless, calculating corporate machine. The rapidly growing industry eagerly traded its artistic, chaotic innocence for strict, profitable corporate control. The enduring mystery of William Desmond Taylor remains deeply fascinating, not simply because we desperately want to know who committed the crime, because the event perfectly demonstrates the incredible, long-lasting power of a well-told, highly protected corporate lie. The deliberate, highly organized cover-up was arguably the absolute greatest, most complex production the silent film era ever successfully produced.